Hades, / æidiːz/ from Ancient Greek iota delta eta / delta eta, was the ancient Greek god of the underworld. Eventually, the god's name came to designate the abode of the dead. In Greek mythology, Hades is the oldest male child of Cronus and Rhea considering the order of birth from the mother, or the youngest, considering the regurgitation by the father. The latter view is attested in Poseidon's speech in the Iliad. According to myth, he and his brothers Zeus and Poseidon defeated the Titans and claimed rulership over the cosmos, ruling the underworld, air, and sea, respectively. The solid earth, long the province of Gaia, was available to all three concurrently. Later, the Greeks started referring to the god as Plouton, see below, which the Romans Latinized as Pluto. The Romans would associate Hades / Pluto with their own chthonic gods, Pater and Orcus. The corresponding Etruscan god was Aita. He is often pictured with the three-headed dog Cerberus. In the later mythological tradition, though not in antiquity, he is associated with the Helm of Darkness and the bident. The origin of Hades' name is obscure. The name as it came to be known in classical times was iota delta eta, {ɪheɪdiːz}. Later the iota became silent. Originally it was * æidiːz, which has been claimed to mean unseen. This changed into delta eta, {ɪheɪdiːz}, and afterwards a with macron ds, with the dropping of the digamma. This Ionic and epic form of the name is the one used in epic poetry. Plato's Critylus speculates extensively upon the etymology, with the character of Socrates asserting that the god's name is not from {ɪheɪdiːz}, unseen, as was commonly thought at the time, but rather from his knowledge, {ɪειδνα), of all noble things. Others have interpreted it as the one who presides over meeting up, in the sense that he is the lord of the place everyone comes to inhabit at the end of his life. Poetic variations of the name include delta omega nu epsilon, {ɪεδιːz}, and **ace, a nominative case by conjecture, from which the inflected forms delta omicron, das, delta iota, di, and delta alpha, de, general, dat, and acc cases, respectively, are commonly seen in poetry. Perhaps from fear of pronouncing his name, c. 5th century BCE the Greeks started referring to Hades as Pluto, pi lambda omicron tau omega nu, Plouton, with the root meaning wealthy, considering that from the abode below, i.e., the soil, come riches, e.g., fertile crops, metals, and so on. More elaborated names of the same genre were pi lambda omicron upsilon tau omicron delta tau eta, Ploutodots, or pi lambda omicron upsilon tau omicron delta omicron tau rho, Ploutodotr, meaning giver of wealth. Epithets of Hades include {ɪeɪdiːz}, gamma sigma alpha nu delta rho omicron, and {ɪeɪdiːz} gamma epsilon sigma lambda alpha omicron, both from ago, gamma omega, lead, carry or fetch, and anr, nu rho, man, or laus, lambda alpha, men or people, describing Hades as the god who carries away all. Nicander uses the form {ɪeɪdiːz} gamma epsilon sigma lambda alpha omicron. In Greek mythology, Hades, the god of the underworld, was a son of the Titans Cronus and Rhea. He had three sisters, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera, as well as two brothers, Zeus, the youngest of the three, and Poseidon, collectively comprising the original 6 Olympian gods. Upon reaching adulthood, Zeus managed to force his father to disgorge his siblings. After their release, the 6 younger gods, along with allies they managed to gather, challenged the elder gods for power in the Titanomachy, a divine war. The war lasted for 10 years and ended with the victory of the younger gods. Following their victory, according to a single famous passage in the Iliad, 15.187-93, Hades and his two brothers, Poseidon and Zeus, drew lots for realms to rule. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the seas, and Hades received the underworld, the unseen realm to which the souls of the dead go upon leaving the world, as well as any and all things beneath the earth. Hades obtained his wife and queen, Persephone, through trickery and violent abduction. The myth, particularly as represented in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, connected the Eleusinian mysteries with the Olympian pantheon. Helios told the grieving Demeter that Hades was not unworthy as a consort for Persephone. Adonis, the ruler of many, is no unfitting husband among the deathless gods for your child, being your own brother and born of the same stock. Also, for honor, he has that third share which he received when division was made at the first, and is appointed lord of those among whom he dwells. Homeric hymn to Demeter. Despite modern connotations of death as evil, Hades was actually more altruistically inclined in mythology. Hades was often portrayed as passive rather than evil. His role was often maintaining relative balance. Hades ruled the dead, assisted by others over whom he had complete authority. He strictly forbade his subjects to leave his domain and would become quite enraged when anyone tried to leave, or if someone tried to steal the souls from his realm. His wrath was equally terrible for anyone who tried to cheat death or otherwise crossed him, as Sisyphus and Pirithous found out to their sorrow. Besides Heracles, the only other living people who ventured to the underworld were all heroes: Odysseus, Aeneas, accompanied by the Sibyl, Orpheus, Theseus with Pirithous, and, in a late romance, Psyche. None of them were pleased with what they witnessed in the realm of the dead. In particular, the Greek war hero Achilles, whom Odysseus conjured with a blood libation, said, "O shining Odysseus, never try to console me for dying. I would rather follow the plough as thrall to another man, one with no land allotted to him and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead." Achilles' soul to Odysseus. Homer, Odyssey 11.488-491. Hades, as the god of the dead, was a fearsome figure to those still living. In no hurry to meet him, they were reluctant to swear oaths in his name, and averted their faces when sacrificing to him. Since to many, simply to say the word Hades was frightening, euphemisms were pressed into use. Since precious minerals come from under the earth, i.e., the underworld ruled by Hades, he was considered to have control of these as well, and was referred to as pi lambda omicron tau omega nu, Plouton, related to the word for wealth, Latinized as Pluto. Sophocles explained referring to Hades as the rich one with these words: "The gloomy Hades enriches himself with our sighs and our tears." In addition, he was called Clymenus, notorious, Polydigmon, who receives many, and perhaps Eubulius, good counsel or well-intentioned, all of them euphemisms for a name that was unsafe to pronounce, which evolved into epithets. He spent most of the time in his dark realm. Formidable in battle, he proved his ferocity in the famous Titanomachy, the battle of the Olympians versus the Titans, which established the rule of Zeus. Feared and loathed, Hades embodied the inexorable finality of death. Why do we loathe Hades more than any god, if not because he is so adamantine and unyielding? The rhetorical question is Agamemnon's. He was not, however, an evil god, for although he was stern, cruel, and unpitying, he was still just. Hades ruled the underworld and was therefore most often associated with death and feared by men, but he was not death itself. The actual embodiment of death was Thanatos. When the Greeks propitiated Hades, they banged their hands on the ground to be sure he would hear them. Black animals, such as sheep, were sacrificed to him, and the very vehemence of the rejection of human sacrifice expressed in myth suggests an unspoken memory of some distant past. The blood from all chthonic sacrifices, including those to propitiate Hades, dripped into a pit or cleft in the ground. The person who offered the sacrifice had to avert his face. One ancient source says that he possessed the cap of invisibility. His chariot, drawn by 4 black horses, made for a fearsome and impressive sight. His other ordinary attributes were the narcissus and cypress plants, the key of Hades and Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. The philosopher Heraclitus, unifying opposites, declared that Hades and Dionysus, the very essence of indestructible life, Zoe, are the same god. Among other evidence, Carl Quirinii notes that the grieving goddess Demeter refused to drink wine, which is the gift of Dionysus, after Persephone's abduction, because of this association, and suggests that Hades may in fact have been a cover name for the underworld Dionysus. He suggests that this dual identity may have been familiar to those who came into contact with the mysteries. One of the epithets of Dionysus was Chthonios, meaning the subterranean. Artistic representations. Hades is rarely represented in classical arts, save in depictions of the rape of Persephone. The consort of Hades was Persephone, represented by the Greeks as the beautiful daughter of Demeter. Oil painting of Hades abducting Persephone. 18th century. Oil on wood with gilt background. Property of missing link antiques. Persephone did not submit to Hades willingly, but was abducted by him while picking flowers in the fields of Nyssa. In protest of his act, Demeter cast a curse on the land and there was a great famine, though, one by one, the gods came to request she lift it, lest mankind perish. She asserted that the earth would remain barren until she saw her daughter again. Finally, Zeus intervened, via Hermes. He requested that Hades return Persephone. Hades complied. But he on his part secretly gave her sweet pomegranate seed to eat, taking care for himself that she might not remain continually with grave, dark-robed Demeter. Demeter questioned Persephone on her return to light and air. But if you have tasted food, you must go back again beneath the secret places of the earth, there to dwell a third part of the seasons every year, yet for the 2 parts you shall be with me and the other deathless gods. This bound her to Hades and the underworld, much to the dismay of Demeter. It is not clear whether Persephone was accomplice to the ploy. Zeus proposed a compromise, to which all parties agreed. Of the year, Persephone would spend 1/3 with her husband. It is during this time that winter casts on the earth an aspect of sadness and mourning. Theseus and Pirithous. Theseus and Pirithous pledged to kidnap and marry daughters of Zeus. Theseus chose Helen and together they kidnapped her and decided to hold on to her until she was old enough to marry. Pirithous chose Persephone. They left Helen with Theseus' mother, Aita, and travelled to the underworld. Hades knew of their plan to capture his wife, so he pretended to offer them hospitality and set a feast. As soon as the pair sat down, snakes coiled around their feet and held them there. Theseus was eventually rescued by Heracles, but Pirithous remained trapped as punishment for daring to seek the wife of a god for his own. Heracles' final labor was to capture Cerberus. First, Heracles went to Eleusis to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. He did this to absolve himself of guilt for killing the centaurs and to learn how to enter and exit the underworld alive. He found the entrance to the underworld at Taenarum. Athena and Hermes helped him through and back from Hades. Heracles asked Hades for permission to take Cerberus. Hades agreed as long as Heracles didn't harm Cerberus. When Heracles dragged the dog out of Hades, he passed through the cavern æ. Minth. According to Ovid, Hades pursued and would have won the nymph Minth, associated with the river Cocytus, had not Persephone turned Minth into the plant called mint. Realm of Hades. In older Greek myths, the realm of Hades is the misty and gloomy abode of the dead, also called Erebus, where all mortals go. Very few mortals could leave Hades once they entered. The exceptions, Heracles and Theseus, are heroic. Even Odysseus in his Nikaia, Odyssey, 11, calls up the spirits of the departed, rather than descend to them. Later Greek philosophy introduced the idea that all mortals are judged after death and are either rewarded or cursed. There were several sections of the realm of Hades, including Elysium, the Asphodel Meadows, and Tartarus. Greek mythographers were not perfectly consistent about the geography of the afterlife. A contrasting myth of the afterlife concerns the Garden of the Hesperides, often identified with the Isles of the Blessed, where the blessed heroes may dwell. Aeneas's journey to Hades through the entrance at Cumae mapped by Andrea de Jorio, 1825. In Roman mythology, the entrance to the underworld located at Avernus, a crater near Cumae, was the route Aeneas used to descend to the realm of the dead. By synecdoche, Avernus could be substituted for the underworld as a whole. The Deianferi were a collective of underworld divinities. For Hellenes, the deceased entered the underworld by crossing the Acheron, ferried across by Charon, who charged an obolus, a small coin for passage placed in the mouth of the deceased by pious relatives. Paupers and the friendless gathered for 100 years on the near shore according to Book 6 of Virgil's Aeneid. Greeks offered propitiatory libations to prevent the deceased from returning to the upper world to haunt those who had not given them a proper burial. The far side of the river was guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed dog defeated by Heracles, Roman Hercules. Passing beyond Cerberus, the shades of the departed entered the land of the dead to be judged. The 5 rivers of the realm of Hades, and their symbolic meanings, are Acheron, the river of sorrow, or woe, Cocytus, lamentation, Phlegethon, fire, Lethe, oblivion, and Styx, hate, the river upon which even the gods swore and in which Achilles was dipped to render him invincible. The Styx forms the boundary between the upper and lower worlds. See also Eridanos. The first region of Hades comprises the fields of Asphodel, described in Odyssey 11, where the shades of heroes wander despondently among lesser spirits, who twitter around them like bats. Only libations of blood offered to them in the world of the living can reawaken in them for a time the sensations of humanity. Beyond lay Erebus, which could be taken for a euphemism of Hades, whose own name was Dread. There were 2 pools, that of Lethe, where the common souls flocked to erase all memory, and the pool of Mnemosyne, memory, where the initiates of the mysteries drank instead. In the forecourt of the palace of Hades and Persephone sit the 3 judges of the underworld, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. There at the trivium sacred to Hecate, where 3 roads meet, souls are judged, returned to the fields of Asphodel if they are neither virtuous nor evil, sent by the road to Tartarus if they are impious or evil, or sent to Elysium, islands of the blessed, with the blameless heroes. In the Sibylline oracles, a curious hodgepodge of Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian elements, Hades again appears as the abode of the dead, and by way of folk etymology, it even derives Hades from the name Adam, the first man, saying it is because he was the first to enter there. Charon the ferryman. In ancient Greece it was customary to place a coin in or on the mouth of the dead since the dead were required to pay a fare to Charon, the ferryman of Hades.